Lucky you!
Best 36 holes in golf.
You tuned in to Alternate Shots Podcast,
Arnie's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Marquis, Sandy's,
poker,
Bond, James Bond.
horse racing,
I'm all in.
great movies.
Alfred Hitchcock.
We have no script.
And down the stretch they come.
We're glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Whoop. Let's start again. All right, Billy, we finally got around to it. We're getting to the James Bond gadgets and gizmos. How about that? Not like the one we just saw. That was the villain's gadget, or I don't know what you call that poison coming down the string. What do you call that?
A technologically advanced string.
Right out of your Singer sewing machine, the little bob. And the only thing that saved James Bond is he went like this and leaned over. And what happened to Aki? She went and spooned with Bond, and that was the end of it for her.
Too bad, yeah.
So Billy and I are back with the Bonds, and we're going to talk about gadgets. There's no way to do this with any kind of script, but I thought what was kind of amusing was in GoldFinger, Bond coming through the I would call it the seagull scuba gear.
Yeah, he had the hat with the duck on top or seagull on top. That's a gimmick, but it's not. We could do that. You just get a decoy duck and put it on your head. So that wasn't one of Q Division's more advanced. But we have to point out the unique thing about James Bond and the consistent thing about James Bond is without any prior knowledge, he could operate any gimmick or any gadget or any moving vehicle like he was an expert at it. It didn't take him long how to figure out how to drive a tank or fly a helicopter upside down or motorcycles or airplanes. You put the controls in front of him, he figured them out like that, which was Q's nightmare because every time he visited Q Division, he was picking up stuff and, put that down. Don't touch that. Like a kid in the candy store.
I think one of Bond's beauties picked up the Polaroid laser beam camera and she started to take a picture of Q and Bond, and they went the other way and she zapped the photograph in front, and you wouldn't have been hearing about Q or Bond much longer in that movie.
And Q deserves kudos for he's one of the longest lasting characters in the series. And even in the newer ones, when John Cleese took over the part, and then the little Harry Potter-like guy in the latest ones with Daniel Craig, it's a great aspect of James Bond. Q Division is just such a great and not spoken about enough, but it's a great part of James Bond.
Yeah, the Q. You're thinking of Harry Potter because you're thinking about the pen bomb, right? 3 and then 2, detonated it, 3, and then the guy was in.
Bond sitting on the side going, "Oh, maybe." Oh, okay.
Yeah, was that in GoldenEye, where the Brainiac computer
GoldenEye. I'm invincible.
Yeah, I'm invincible, and he was doing it, and we lost track. It was like watching a 3-card Monte play.
Right.
I didn't know where it ended up. Did he detonate it? Did he not detonate it? That was the suspense. So
it was sort of fun to try and keep track, but as a viewer, you didn't have to keep track. It's either blowing or it isn't. And if it was necessary to blow up, it was going to blow up.
And everyday items, that was an everyday item, a pen. Or how about the cigarette rocket launcher, right? That was pretty
Yeah, he had that in You Only Live Twice, I think it was. Or was it Diamonds Are Forever?
No, you're right. You Only Live Twice. And that got him out of a bind. I don't really remember where the toothpaste, the Detonite toothpaste came in.
But I don't really remember it that much either. I just remember, you're making exploding toothpaste and they gave it a name. Q could have just said this stuff will blow up.
License to Kill. The reason you don't really remember it, they're all good, like you said, but you look at Rotten Tomatoes or some rating agency about movies, it's among the lowest of the 25 or 27 Bonds. There's a couple of fake Bonds that people call Bonds, like, you know, the one spoof of Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again. But yeah, I mean, how about the Golden Gun? I mean, that wasn't a Bond gadget, but that was pretty clever. $1 million a bullet.
And that was more, you know, directed at the villain. You know, that was his particular tool, as opposed to a Walter PPK, which James Bond always had.
How about when when Bond meets the tool maker for the Golden Gun bullet maker, and he wants to get the identity of who owns the Golden Gun, and the guy is in this little ratty little, what is it, like basement, and he's got this gun, and he's like, moves it over toward the guy's private parts. He says, "Oh, I'll get those for you right away."
Yeah, exactly. But you can't talk about Bond gadgets and leave out the attaché case, because as kids, and again, Bond transcends every age. As a kid, it's, you know, wow, this is great. The gimmicks are great. The secret agent part's great. You know, and as an adult, the adventure and the, you know, the Bond girls and everything. You know, it covers every age group. In its own way. James Bond captures every age group in its own way. But, you know, if you were a kid like I was, and you guys were, anybody my age was, when these movies first started coming out in the 60s, you had to get the attaché case. When Mattel came out with the attaché case, you had to get it with the hidden knife and the camera and the, you know, the exploding tear gas, or if you opened it the wrong way.
Sure.
It didn't come with 50 Krugerrands or gold pieces or whatever else was in there.
They sold zillions of them, and
yeah, and it was,
kids
you know,
gobbled them up.
Stuff. You know, you could fire shooting shells, I think they called them back in those days, where, you know, the toy guns that actually fired little bullets.
Yeah.
You know, and how many times did you hear you could put somebody's eye out?
The talcum powder component in that briefcase, attaché case, Robert Shaw, who played the bad guy in From Russia with Love, he had the little garrote came out of his wrist, and he wrapped it around, and that was the end of it. Once it was like having your head inside a crocodile. You weren't getting out of that.
Yeah. And Robert Shaw, you know, the gamut of roles he played in his life, that was a really good one and an early one for him. But, you know, as we all know, he went on to get eaten by Jaws, the real Jaws. What was he, Quint, in that movie? But he was a great actor, and he played that part very well. He was really, of all the adversaries Bond ever had, he was really kind of the most treacherous. I mean, there's always Odd Job, but you could see him coming, or Jaws when they got in the Roger Moore ones. You could see him. You could see those guys coming. Robert Shaw playing that guy was, you know, he was stealth.
Bond didn't know until the very end of the movie who the killer villain was. In the other movies you talk about, he knew when he saw that big old Jaws with the silver teeth coming in, he knew what to do. He could get prepared. He could get in a position across the table in the dining car while Robert Shaw is putting a Mickey in his girlfriend's white wine to disable her so he can have his way with Bond. And he spoke. He spoke. All these other villains really were more appearance, like,
and grunts. Odd Job never spoke.
Odd Job, he never spoke. So it was a single dimension kind of foe or villain, whereas Robert Shaw put on the English accent as a Russian spy.
Right. He was as good an agent as 007 for the other side. And he was able to, you know, win 007 over. He conned 007. That's not done that often.
Another one I like in that movie, and you've heard me talk about this, is Rosa Clubb. But she had the, you know, the dagger shoe with the poison tip. And she got her fellow spy, Kronstein. I think she got him. But at the very end of the movie, while the whole plot of the movie is to get the Lecter, you know, the decoding typewriter type device, and he gets it, and he's with the girl, beautiful beauty. They're in the hotel room, cleaning the room, and she's going to get the bag. She's
got the shoe out, and she's kind of limping around trying to kick him.
Pretty close. All she had to do. By the way, that was the what third or fourth Bond. That would have been it for the series.
Again, but they were smart enough not to kill him, unlike the last guys who made the movie. We've been over that. So you can't kill James Bond. You can't kill James Bond. It's a fact of life. You can't beat up the Three Stooges. It's a fact of life. They're impervious to pain. You're not going to win in a fight with them. They'll say "ow," but you'll never put them down. You hit them with a hammer, the hammer breaks. So there are certain undisputable facts in movie and film history, and
yeah, Daniel Craig. I mean, I watched the last one.
yeah, they killed him. So
we're upset about that. They killed him.
I know.
You can't kill James Bond, right? It's not allowed.
What I say, he's not dead. This franchise might have decided to end it, but James Bond will be back.
He has to. He has to.
James Bond getting killed? Nope, never going to happen.
As our friend Gabby says, 007's going to be a man. It's got to be a man. Has to be a man. You can have a woman, but let's call her 008.5 or whatever you want to call her.
Or turn the circle upside down, or what? Do something different.
Make her unique so she can create a great series.
Right.
The purpose of our two previous encounters is now very clear to me. I do not intend to be distracted by another. Good night, Mr. Bond.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Why does she have to live in the shadow of a previous man? She should be her own agent. Right. And it would be great, I think, if you had, 008 or 001 make her, whatever you want to make her. Or come up with a completely different, MI6 type group and have her, But for God's sakes, use some creativity and originality.
We talked about James Bond and Sean Connery, the first 5 Bonds. He was not perfect. The director, Terrence, the director, was really instrumental in polishing that rough diamond.
Refining him, yeah.
He didn't have this pose that we're looking at here, leaning up against that. He would have probably looked all gangly and awkward if it weren't for Terrence Young, who told him, this is how I would pose if I were you, in his bespoke suit and the $400 tie and the $1,000 haircut.
But he was clearly intelligent enough to understand his new role and buy into Terrence Young's tutelage. And it probably helped him going further in his career, because Sean Connery went on to make a lot of great movies. He stopped being Bond because he didn't want to be typecast his whole life. That's where the Never Say Never Again came from. But he got out of the role. He was able to do other stuff, like The Man Who Would Be King or Entrapment, where he plays the thief, the high-rise thief. He did get away, and Daniel Craig will probably get away from the role as well.
Daniel Craig has gotten away. He's done these couple of kind of detective series.
Yeah, he did the Tat Lady with the tattoo movie.
Yeah. And he's sort of moving on. I think the producers back then probably loved Sean Connery and what they created. They wanted him forever, but they didn't know when to quit. And you have to have the physical ability.
That's the kind of character you need, that just ooze this, elan. For Sean Connery to convert to that type of character from his rugby self was a pretty good job by him.
They also brought the common person into the high life, the high style life, that
was always the best part. We get to go to the casinos and we don't have to risk
the high-end resorts like the one and only in the Bahamas.
Yeah, and even in the later movies with Daniel Craig going to some of those incredibly beautiful places, like where he's convalescing after his bad time. He said, where is that? That would love to just sit there for a few hours.
Overlooking the Mediterranean, the Amalfi Coast. Well, he was convalescing.
Mr. White's house. Mr. White had a nice house in that kind of area. He got shot in his ankle there, but yeah.
Well, it started with the writer. Ian Fleming had this beautiful little, I don't know, probably 1,500, 2,000 square foot casita overlooking the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. He was 15 feet from his typewriter. If you're looking at what we're using right now, computers, that was his typewriter. The Caribbean was right there, 15 feet away. So it was easy for him to imagine these beautiful scenes.
Speaking of beautiful scenes, the picture that's on our screen right now with Sean Connery leaning up against the be all and end all of gadgets, I think, in any movie history. That Aston Martin.
The Aston Martin DB5.
Yeah.
You know,
With machine guns and oil slicks and tacks and bulletproof shields and the ejector seat. And again, as a kid, I don't know if you guys all remember Corgi toys, but they were upscale vehicles. They had spring suspension and stuff. They were great toys. They had cop cars, trucks, all kinds of different stuff, Corvettes. And they all had little gimmicks like the trunk opens or the windows go up and down. And when they came out with the Aston Martin, it did a lot of the tricks, including the ejector seat. You got a little tiny guy sitting in the seat. You hit the button and the roof opens and the guy gets shot out of there. And if you were like any other kid in the world, the little guy got lost within the first couple of days. You know, so you had to make up little guys or make them out of paper or something like that. The ejector seat is iconic in and of itself. So what's really good about the Q division was they were able to like sort of pick apart Bond's next mission and equip him with stuff. It was always different than the last time, but it was always stuff he needed on this mission. Coincidentally, you know, good thing I have my Dentonite.
Right. Notwithstanding, Skyfall was a huge commercial success, big sales globally. But at the end of the movie, he goes back to the Aston Martin.
Yeah, when Judi Dench as the new M. See, that worked. They made Judi Dench M. They didn't have to change the character around. She was just the next in succession. She was great at the job. She did it differently than the first guy, but she was great at the job, and she had that tongue-in-cheek thing going. And he's making the getaway with her in the Aston Martin, and she makes a reference to like, do not hit that ejector seat button on me.
Yeah. Well, she was tough with him. Don't ever come in my apartment. How did you find me? Don't ever come on my. And he's using her computer.
At the same time, she's also like that. How does he do this?
Yeah.
So there was a mutual respect for each other in those later Bonds. With Sean Connery, you know, took his orders from M, but I don't think there was sort of a mutual thing going on there.
They never mingled. There was either see him in the Q's office or M's office, and that was it.
Yeah.
Even Q.
And he was a thorn in Bond's side a lot of times. You know, you got to use this instead of that. So he'd have to sneak his Walter PPK back in, or he'd have to break off his flirtations with Moneypenny because M was listening in. So there was that kind of stuff going on. But with Judi Dench, it was another relationship. She knew she had, you know, a tiger by the tail that she couldn't manage, but she also knew she didn't want to overmanage him because he was so successful.
She was tough, and then, you know, she did go out with him in Skyfall, and we know how that went. But in Skyfall, there were some good old-fashioned, you know, kind of levers and springs as great little gadgets. The way they put the shotgun shells in the light bulbs and on the floorboards.
That's what I mean. His abilities go far beyond any normal. He was an expert in anything explosive and anything that moved.
Bridge is that way! You're not thinking that.
I sure am, boy. Ever heard of Evel Knievel?
I've never done that before.
Oh, neither have I, actually.
James Bond mastered it in seconds, with the exception of GoldFinger, where he couldn't quite figure out how to stop that nuclear bomb at Fort Knox. And he was about to push the wrong button. And at the last second, the guy that does know how to stop it takes his hand away and, you know, stops the bomb at 0.007 seconds left. So
the other one in Thunderball with this little breathing device, remember? It kind of looked like a chapstick almost. It was, and I think that worked.
Yeah, and he had the little jetpack on, and he's going in the underwater. That was such a great scene in and of itself to conceive.
The underwater Lotus Esprit S1 submarine car, that was in The Spy Who Loved Me. But even back into Dr. No, the Geiger counter, it was a gadget
Yeah, and I was thinking about that the other day, and I don't know if you remember the old Superman series with George Reeves, but they had a Geiger counter in that show once when Superman got radioactive.
Was that with the two little Martians that were in the hole, the little guys?
They had one in that too. Yeah, that was called The Unknown People. Where it was a double episode, and they had a Geiger counter in that also. So it was not a well-known device in the world, because who has a Geiger counter? But in Dr. No, that was almost the extent of the gadgetry for the good guys.
If you had a choice and you could have the real McCoy and it worked 100% as advertised, would you want the jetpack or would you want the Aston Martin DB5?
I'll take the Aston Martin because I'm afraid of heights.
Yeah. I think, depending on if you lived in Long Island on the LIE, you'd like to have the jetpack.
Well, there must be some combination of the two somewhere, or there will be, where you can, turn the car into a helicopter or something like that. I'll take the Aston Martin with little Nelly in the trunk.
We didn't even talk about little Nelly, and that technology. I was just watching Maverick, Top Gun, and there was so much shooting going on there. I kept thinking about little Nelly because he had a lot of rocket launchers and guns
and invaders.
And that was in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I was going to say that also, Q went out to the site and helped James Bond put that together.
Right, because he had to go,
That's You Only Live Twice.
Yeah, Q was the instruction manual.
Yeah. Yeah, and Q has been in the most James Bonds of any character. I think he was in 17. And he sort of faded out in the later ones, and John Cleese came in. John Cleese didn't do a lot of them, but he did one or two. He was
one or two or three, yeah. I like the new guy too. I do like the new guy, the kid.
I think the new guy, we haven't even seen his capabilities. I think they're going to unleash him. I think they introduced him conservatively, and Moneypenny I like.
Yeah, they're both much more interactive in the movies now. They're more important. They don't just give Bond stuff and go away. They help him throughout.
They were all involved in that Skyfall where they came into cabinet and started shooting up all the cabinet members. They're much more involved than behind mahogany office doors.
And that scene was a great scene because M is up there trying to explain to these stodgy, ignorant board or people in control, sort of like when the Congress has a hearing in our country, that you don't need these guys on the street anymore. And then the next thing you know, here comes Bond to save the day because he is on the street, And Javier Bardem was great. He's great in every movie, but he was pretty good in that movie.
He did some clever things and disappearing.
Yeah, he lured Bond into a dead subway place where it almost had him crushed by a subway train.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Yeah, he was one step ahead of them the whole way in that movie.
Yeah, take that, Indiana Jones. You just had to run away from a big old rock coming down subway with 20 train cars.
Yeah, it always reminds me of the old cartoons where a guy's running down the tracks away from a train. And even as a kid, I would say, take a left or a right.
Yeah, that's right.
Stop running straight,
Well, we don't have much information, but as we do, we'll get into who might be the next James Bond. There's betting lines. We won't have to do this today, but there's several, 3 or 4 or 5 candidates, and I think probably in the next year.
If you're listening to this podcast, in the comment line underneath, send us suggestions because we'd love to talk about that. It's like speculating about who could play James Bond. It would be a lot of fun.
You can bet on who the next Aaron Taylor or Idris Elba, whoever it is, but be interesting.
Otherwise, just tell us who you'd like to see play Bond, even if he's not on the list. It's an interesting discussion. I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, and tell us what your favorite gadget is, and tell us what your favorite Bond theme song is, and who sung it. Whether it's Tom Jones or Sheena Easton or Adele. We'd like to hear what that might be.
Nancy Sinatra. Yeah.
All right, buddy. That's a wrap.
Thanks, ma'am.
I'm sorry, but James Bond can't be a girl. 007 can't be a girl.
Thank you. 008 can be a girl.
Yeah, but 007, that's James Bond, that's a man, it's only going to be a man.
Why are you laughing?
Well, at least we have the laugh to add at the end.
Right. We've gone from 12 handicaps at this to 19 handicaps in just a week.
That's what happened. Somebody changed my grip, and the next thing you know, I can't do the podcast anymore. I felt like I was in the first row of the first pew at church right during the sermon.
And your brother was poking
My
you.
brother was making me laugh.
Thanks for joining us
Casper,
today.
Billy
We
Harmon,
really appreciate your
Double
feedback.
Indemnity,
And please
Arky,
subscribe to the
Two
show.
Rider,
Hit 'em
Odd
hard
Job.
and hit 'em off.
That's 36 holes.